Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and all else, to my 2020 Halloween special, a collection of 10 chilling creepypasta stories for you all to enjoy on the scariest night of the year. Though based on the year, that is a lot to ask. I certainly hope you enjoy them and have a wonderful night, all things considered. Make sure you stay safe and sound. Thank you all for joining me for this year. Links to every story shall be in the description. Check them out for yourself if you want to, and make sure you give these talented authors kind words. With all of that said and out of the way, it's time we take a look at the top 10 creepypastas of 2020. Here we go. Number 10. Grocery List. You get a phone call from your mother. Since her car has been in the shop, she asks you to go to the grocery store and pick up a few odds and ends for her. Bread, milk, cereal, and chicken breasts. After writing down a small list, you reluctantly get in the car and pick up the items at the store. The lady cashier makes an odd remark to you. You know, we're in no danger of a milk shortage. Upon arriving at her house, you knock several times. No answer. You decide to try the door. It opens. You place the grocery bag on the counter. Strange. There seems to be 6 other grocery bags, each with identical contents. In a couple, the chicken and the milk has gone bad. Mom? You call out, but no answer. You make your way through the kitchen and into the living room. Sitting on the couch with her head cut off and neatly resting on her lap is your mother. Naturally, you call the police, who come over to investigate. They mention that she has been dead for nearly a week. Furthermore, the police psychiatrist is at the scene and talks to you after you give your initial statement. Sitting on the front steps, you overhear the psychiatrist talking with a crime scene investigator. It's not uncommon for people suffering from schizophrenia to get locked in a series of repetitive behaviors, he says. You think to yourself, they can't be talking about me. Schizophrenia? No way. Repetitive behavior? Do they think I did this? Suddenly your cell phone goes off. Hello?
Hi, hon, it's me. Could you stop at the store and pick up some chicken and milk? Oh, and I need some bread and cereal too.
No problem, Mom. I'll be right over. Number 9. Sandy Girl. See the little Sandy girl sitting on a stone, weeping, crying, all the day alone. Stand up, Sandy girl, wipe your tears away, choose the one you love the most, and dance, dance away. I had always been the type to enjoy a good walk along some quiet beach. Ever since I was very little, I had found the beach to be one of the most alluring places in the world. Some people like woods, others prefer play parks or hills, but I was definitely the kind that enjoyed the feeling of sand under my toes and the smell of the sea around me. When I was little, my mother always sang Little Sandy Girl to me, and sometimes other kids would sit in a circle and play the game with me. I loved that song more than anything, and I'm sure my mother sang it to me to keep me amused when I wasn't able to get to the beach. Even as I grew older and the nursery songs stopped, I would hum that tune to myself as I walked down the beach, enjoying the time I had and often spending hours at a time just wandering across the seaside. One day, I must have stayed longer than I ever had before, losing all sense of time until I noticed the sun was beginning to set. Now, as much as I loved the beach, I knew they were not exactly the best places to be at night, and thus decided to make my way out before it got too dark. It was then that I heard something that made me pause, shivers running down my spine. It was a song I had heard so many times as a child, little more than a whisper, yet seeming to travel so clearly to my ears. See the little Sandy girl sitting on a stone, weepin', cryin', all the day alone. Stand up, Sandy girl, wipe your tears away, choose the one you love the most, and dance, dance away. Instantly, I looked over to the source and saw a vision that made me question my sanity. In what seemed to be a perverse mockery of the song, a little figure not like a girl made out of sand was sitting atop a stone on the beach, her hands covering her face as bitter tears seemed to come from her tiny form. I could feel a sense of dread filling my body as I stared at the ghostly figure, the weeping seeming to grow stronger as the ethereal music continued to play over and over, as if an invisible choir was at work. Just as I began to back away, the figure suddenly stood up and looked towards me. The face was little more than swirling sands, and no visible features could be found. The figure proceeded to extend long arms towards me as it began to sway slightly in a macabre dance, and my fight-or-flight instincts finally took a hold. I fled as fast as I could out of the area, not daring to look back, my heart racing as the ghostly singing played once more in my mind. See the little sandy girl sitting on a stone, weeping, crying, all the day alone. Stand up, sandy girl, wipe your tears away. Choose the one you love the most, and dance, dance away. Several days went by and I began to calm down. I never told my friends or family about what happened, and I knew they would probably think that I was crazy. Truth is, sometimes I wonder if I am crazy myself. As for going back to the beach, well, let's just say I don't have such a fondness for the seaside anymore. I'm more of a stay-at-home person these days.
Number 8. Subway Nuts. "I'm going to see my son," I heard the old woman say. There was an unmistakable joy in her voice that pitched it high above the usual sounds of a busy morning subway platform. "Yeah?" a younger voice answered. I looked up from my phone to see the little boy in his Catholic school uniform who had become her reluctant but nonetheless captive audience. The woman wore a long brown coat and a cap to match. With scraggly white hair and a rather no-nonsense air about her, she looked like a retired professor or librarian. Characters like her were far from uncommon on public transit. Sometimes they were talkative, as this one turned out to be. "Yeah," the woman said in return. "Would you like to come with me?" If I wasn't invested before, I was now. One of my favorite things to do was collect stories from the colorful folks that populated the tunnels beneath Boston. Subway nuts, I called them, always affectionately. From the sound of it, this woman's story was set to become the latest in my collection. Stealthily, I navigated to the recording app I had on my phone and hit the little button to silently set it going. Please be good, I thought. "Come with you?" the little boy asked, his discomfort clearly audible. "Oh yes," the woman said. "I'm sure he'd love a little friend like you. You see, you might think by looking at me that my son is a grown-up like your daddy, but that's where you'd be wrong. He's only a little boy." The schoolboy seemed to take this in and mull it over. "Your son doesn't live with you?" The woman was caught off guard by the question. "Oh, no," she finally answered. "Not anymore." "Why?" At that moment, I thanked my lucky stars for the natural, if impolite directness possessed by most children. "Well," the woman began, "he decided he didn't want to live with me anymore, so he went somewhere else." I saw her frown. Her eyes glazed over and slipped into some other world, a memory only she could see. "What happened?" the boy asked. The woman smiled weakly at him. "I don't like to talk about that," she said, "but even though he doesn't live with me anymore, we still talk every day." "That's good," said the boy, his stilted voice betraying the social graces training he'd received from his elders. "Yes, indeed," the woman said, her cheeks rosing over once again as she rocked gently on her seat. "Every morning he talks to me, my Dennis. He's a good boy. In a way, it's good that we've had this time apart. It's shown us both how much we miss each other." She frowned again. "I haven't been the best mother," she said, "but I certainly intend to make up for it." "How?" the little boy asked. A smile crept across the old woman's face. It was a strange smile. I didn't like it. Somehow her eyes burned too brightly, and her happiness seemed too unrestrained for a morning's commute. "Well, you see," she said. It was all she managed to get out, because a second after she began speaking, the sound of the next train came echoing down the nearby tunnel. I kept my eyes glued to the woman as she turned her face upward. Something about her posture was reverent, prayer-like. "Here comes the train," she said. "Are you sure you don't want to come with me?" "I can't," the boy called out in his best attempt to speak over the approaching roar. "That's too bad," the woman said with a shake of her head. "He would have liked you." Without another word, she collected her bag and rose. Swiftly, she stepped toward the end of the platform, not hesitating or looking back for a moment. The train was just about to break the tunnel and pull into the station. Then, there were screams, commotion, train wheels screeched to a halt. I felt a splash of something warm hit my face. Flecks of red dotted my phone's screen. Out of instinct, I looked over again at the Catholic schoolboy to see his uniform ruined, stained and spotted by the same dark liquid. His eyes were wide and blank as it dripped down his face as well. As bodies raced and voices thrummed, I hit the stop button on the recording. This I followed by clicking the trash icon to delete the recording completely. I didn't need a file like that on my phone. She never even screamed. How disappointing. Number 7. Molly's Gaze. When my mother began renting the house that we currently live in, a stray cat adopted us. She was a skittish little thing, and terribly sick too. For the first few months she was with us, her eyes were constantly filled with gunk and pus. We figured that someone had attempted to drown her in the creek by our house. We took very good care of her though, and eventually her eyes cleared up, and she seemed to trust and love us. If you met her today, you would have never guessed how sick and scrawny she was when we first saw her. She has the most gorgeous amber eyes that glow like wise little lamps in the light, and she has long white whiskers sprouting from her dainty little snout. Her sleek tabby coat is a beautiful and bright shade of orange. We call her Molly. Molly has a few strange habits, much like many other cats around the world do. Her purr, for example, is loud and squeaky. You can hear her happiness from across the room. And she has a thing for shoes too. When my mother has guests over, Molly will roll around on the person's shoes, sometimes licking the soles while she sniffs at them. Oh, and she really seems to hate the rug that lays in the middle of our living room floor. It's a huge and gaudy floral thing, and I don't really blame Molly for hating it and wanting to shred it to bits with her tiny little claws. Of course, as I'm sure many other cats do, she has this strange way of staring off into space. When Molly finds something to stare at, I very seldom find what it is she is looking for. Sometimes it's a ladybug creeping along a window pane. Molly loves to look at the pretty things like ladybugs, but there are so many times that I've seen her concentrate, with all of her might, on something unseen. More often than not, this will happen in my living room. There are a few times that I've witnessed Molly become startled by whatever it is she had locked eyes with, expressed by the bushing of her tail and the arching of her back. Some people believe that cats have access to senses that humans cannot feel. Did you know that? I suppose the reason for me writing right now is because of something I've recently taken into consideration. Rumors about my house used to circulate my small town. Some gossipy old ladies believed that the previous owners used to hold cult gatherings in the night. Whenever someone would try to bring those old stories up to me, I would blow them off with a roll of my eyes and insist that the women that started that rumor were old and senile, and that nothing that they said should be taken seriously. Then, this morning while I was vacuuming, I noticed my cat sitting at the foot of my staircase, her tail wrapped around her front paws. Normally when she hears the vacuum, she takes shelter under a bed from the noise, so I was a little puzzled when she sat perfectly still while the monstrous machine gobbled the dust and crumbs from my living room rug. It took me a second to notice that she was doing it again. The staring. I never explained why my mother bought that ugly rug in the first place, did I? Well, when we first moved here, there was an enormous stain that wouldn't come up from the copper-colored carpet. Number 6. Did you fall? Did you know that the world isn't always what you see it to be? Have you ever considered, just for 1 second, that the last time you climbed the stairs, you didn't make it? Consider this the next time you climb up or down a flight of stairs. Perhaps, as you're reaching the top or stepping down onto the bottom, that while you were ascending or descending, that you actually fell, and your mind is refusing to register it. Perhaps instead of walking away from the stairs and going about your day the way you think you did, you're actually at the bottom, injured. Perhaps you broke some bones. Perhaps it was your neck. Perhaps you're actually dying. Consider this proposal, as at any moment the illusion could break. You will wake up at the bottom of the stairs, bleeding and broken, or awaken in a hospital bed, potentially with brain damage. Perhaps the illusion will be broken only by the coldness of death. Perhaps at any moment during this illusion, you could slip away and everything will just suddenly go black. 1 second you are driving your car or watching TV, and the next, nothing. Perhaps this is your wake-up call. Number 5. Peripheral Vision. Have you ever gotten a glimpse of something out of the corner of your eye? A simple movement caught in your peripheral vision. Most will simply dismiss this as a shadow brought about by a flickering candle, or perhaps a pet jumping down from a piece of furniture. But then, there's that one elusive sight. It can easily be explained by the above conditions, but something feels wrong about it. A chill down your spine, a slight pain in your side, maybe even a complete blanking of your mind, only to recede moments later. Should any of these symptoms be felt, there may be cause for worry. Our peripheral vision is designed to catch motion, even in the dark. This was used to defend against predators in our early days, and as with many aspects of our human nature, it has remained, but weakened. This view out of the corner of our eye still alerts us to danger, and although predators have dropped on the list of dangers we may face today, they still exist. Should you ever feel that queer chill in your back, try not to focus on that shadow you saw in the corner of your eye. It might be better not to see. Number 4. What if? We all remember monsters. We remember the beast that lurked under our bed, the one that resided in our closet, the one that leered at us from the dark shadows in our room. Everyone has always had their own personal monster that always kept them on edge. Mommy or daddy would always turn on the light and prove that no such monster was there. The nightlight that was plugged in kept all the shadows and scary things away. The lullaby would send the monster away, writhing in agony from such sweet, loving words. But now that we're older, we have forgotten our monsters. The shadows of the night, the closet and the space beneath the bed are things we've grown out of fearing, something we care very little about and even consider mundane. The most frightening thing about all of the listed places is knowing that you'll have to clean up whatever mess is there. But did you ever think that maybe that monster is still there? Just because you don't see or don't believe in something doesn't make it any less real. We're all convinced that the monsters only existed within our own minds. But did you ever think that may be untrue? What if we are the monsters? What if those lurking shadows and glowing eyes we swear to see are what we become in the afterlife? Maybe heaven isn't real. Maybe we aren't reincarnated. Maybe we don't just end up becoming food for the parasites that live underground. What if we become the monsters of our childhood and strike fear into the hearts of those we watch over? Number 3. It's not the wind. It was almost like every other night, but what was different about this night is that the wind was severely strong. It was near impossible to open a door, let alone close it back. I was simply lying in my bed when I heard the door shake as if somebody was knocking on it. I shrugged it off as the wind hitting my door. A few seconds later, the knocking wind happened again, this time louder. I figured the wind was getting worse and tried to drown out the sounds with some television until it died off. A few minutes passed by and something scared me half to death. The wind got so strong that it sounded like something was slamming on my door. I thought maybe a screw was loose, and despite the strength of the wind, I needed to get it fixed now. I got up, went to take a piss, and headed down to the garage to find a screwdriver. While I was searching, the wind died down enough that the slamming on my door went back to knocking. Once I found the screwdriver, I proceeded to the door to find which screw was loose enough to cause the door to be unstable. However, when I opened the door, there was no wind. There was something I was not expecting. On the other side of the door, what I believe was knocking and slamming on it was another human. But he was different. He had no iris in his eyes, just large black pupils with the white part of the eye still there. He stared at me, and after what seemed to be eternity, said, "Hello, it's about time you answered." I blacked out afterwards and woke up in a hospital bed. A nurse informed me that my neighbor, who was sitting on her front porch enjoying the wind, saw some strange man walk up to my door and hit me in the side of my head with a lead pipe. She called the police and then noticed that the man seemed to be messing with my eyes, and before she finished dialing 911, he was gone. The nurse finished looking at her clipboard, looked at me, and then screamed. She dropped the clipboard and pen, continued screaming, and ran away. I looked at another doctor and asked, "What's her problem?" He did the same thing. I finally noticed the same man from that night staring at me from outside the window. That was impossible, considering I am on the 3rd floor, informed by the nurse who told me about the neighbor. I noticed something, and after checking a mirror somebody left on the table next to me, I finally realized why he had visited me that night. That man gave me his eyes, and took mine. Number 2. Far corner. The removal van arrives late, so by the time I have everything moved into my new room, the sun has long since set. It has been a long day of driving, about 8 hours in the car traveling to our new home. I decide to sleep at an earlier hour than usual, as I will most likely have to wake up early tomorrow morning to help my parents with the unpacking. For tonight, my bed is an uncovered mattress on the floor, underneath a window that permits a few beams of soft moonlight into the room, bright enough to make out shapes, not bright enough to distinguish anything. In the darkness, the boxes containing my possessions transform into shadowed beings. One by the door, one at the foot of the bed, one in the far corner. I feel a few pangs of fear, but nothing more than usual. I never have been good at adjusting to new environments. After tossing and turning for an hour or so, I slip into unconsciousness. Later that night, I have an attack of sleep paralysis. I am lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, and I cannot move. I notice a shadowed figure standing over me, and am immediately gripped by a gut-wrenching fear. The figure is indistinct, and I can pick out no features upon its body or face. It begins to murmur, an almost silent torrent of words that I cannot understand. My fear begins to lessen immediately as I realize this is simply a dream. This is an example of what I meant by not adjusting well. I often suffer from sleep paralysis when I sleep in new locations. After what must be an hour, I come to the realization that I can move again. The figure is gone, and I am freed from my night terrors. As I once again slip away into sleep, it occurs to me that I have never realized that I am in a moment of sleep paralysis until after I awake. I dismiss the thought as I am now exhausted and wish to catch at least a few hours of shut-eye before the morning light. I awake the next morning to find myself facing the wall. Although the room is still dim, a few shafts of golden sunlight filter through the blinds, illuminating the space. The first thing that I think of is the sleep paralysis last night. It was strange that I knew I was dreaming, but I guess I'm just getting used to it. As I roll over, my eyes are drawn to a particular spot. The far corner is empty. Number 1. The entire year of 2020. No, I'm just kidding, that is not the final entry, though maybe it should be. Number 1. You won't feel a thing. The town felt abandoned. Once loved and cherished by members of society, now a dead, decaying wasteland. The only building left standing was an isolated castle on top of a small hill at the edge of the town. The cold stone that brushed against my sides as I made my way through the ruins sent shivers up my spine, causing goosebumps all over. I could smell the storm steadily approaching this foreboding town. The only way to stay dry was to make my way up to the damp, lonely castle. The memories from the past civilizations were nearly forgotten, as only the wind could be heard whistling in between cracks and crevices. Doors squeaking, floorboards creaking, as I made my way deeper into what seemed like an endless way of tunnels. The smell of dust overtook my nostrils, causing me to wheeze and cough with every step I took. This inhalation caused bile to rise in my throat, all the while going deeper, maybe too deep to ever return. A strange silhouette led me further into this place. Its somewhat human presence led me to follow. It comforted my uneasiness about this strange dwelling, but as it led me further, I couldn't help but worry whether I'd make it out at all. I got a closer look at the silhouette. It showed the face of a man, and a pale one at that. The strange man looked at me as if I was a child. Sorrow and pity was found as I searched the dark crevices that were his eyes. I stared for as long as I could, but found nothing more. He gestured to a door. Rough old oak, I guessed. I heard the thunder from the passing storm outside, and I wondered if this man would be my way out, or my reason never to return. The creak of floorboards made an insidious sound, one that stood all my senses on end. I searched the room for some answers and was horrified by my discovery. Stacks of bodies in every position possible stained the room red. The scene was one from a nightmare, the bodies even hanging from the roof. Suddenly, I felt a sharp jab in my neck. My whole body ruptured in tremors, and I fell to the floor gagging. He cackled, a sound only true evil could provoke. Gasping, mouth frothing, eyes rolling, my very last resort was to scream. Scream for the help that would never come. Scream for forgiveness from whatever evil spirit bestowed this upon me. Scream. I sank back, exhausted. I was his next victim. I stared into his eyes, dark pits of emptiness. At last, he whispered, "Don't worry, you won't feel a thing." And there you have it. That was a collection of 10 creepypastas for the year 2020. I certainly hope you enjoyed listening to them and found them all to be interesting and intriguing. Thank you so much for joining me for Halloween of this year. A huge thank you to each and every author who was featured in this video, who created some fantastic stories. Happy Halloween, everyone. Stay awesome. Goodbye.